y'all, it's Becky here from The Becky School, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Becky, and every Tuesday and Thursday we talk about the climate here. The problems, yes, but the solutions, yes. So if that sounds like something you would be interested in, go ahead and hit that subscribe button below, click the like, comment, share, all that good stuff. And today we are going to talk about Biden's infrastructure plan and the environmental implications of that plan. So joining me today, I have my friend Mikey. He is an Illinoisan. I don't know what the term is. He's from Illinois, and he is an environmental specialist and geospatial analyst. So I thought he would make a great addition as another voice on this channel. In fact, we are actually going to be he's going to co-host the book club with me for this next book club. As you might know, we are finishing All We Can Save, and we're starting How to Avoid a Climate Disaster by Bill Gates next, so stay tuned for that. But I wanted to go ahead and have him work with me on some other projects, and this is our first one together, so very exciting. Before we go ahead and get along with our chat, because we chatted over Zoom, apologies ahead of time for poor quality, but I wanted to start by just giving a brief summary about Biden's $2.3 trillion infrastructure proposal, jobs proposal, I guess it's considered now, and more specifically what things to look out for having to do with environmental implications. So let's start there. So using some of the information I got from an NPR article, as well as looking at the original infrastructure proposal itself, there are many different categories in the plan that are laid out as such. So there's the transportation, which will focus on vehicle investments, particularly EVs or electric vehicles. There is investment on bridges and roads and on improving road safety in general. There's going to be funding going towards existing public transit. I know that they're specifically working with Amtrak on some of that. And they're also going to finance more railway systems and improve infrastructure resilience in general in the transportation sector. They're going to spend more money working on fixing different airports and on waterways and ports of entry, and then also on reconnecting urban neighborhoods cut off by highways. The infrastructure proposal also emphasizes the importance of improving our water systems, so spending $45 billion on removing lead pipes. So Biden wants to completely get rid of lead pipes, which is great. He also wants to spend $56 million on modernizing the water systems. There's also increasing high-speed broadband throughout the nation, because that's basically just a public good at this point. He wants to spend more money, $100 billion on the electric grid and clean energy. And within clean energy, I believe he wants to spend $400 billion on incentives for clean energy production, or credit, I think. He also wants to spend $16 billion putting people to work, capping old and abandoned oil and gas wells, and also abandoned mines, so cleaning up some fossil fuel leftovers. And then he also wants to spend $10 billion on the Civilian Climate Corps, which I am so interested in doing a video on that in the future when it gets up and running, because I'm just so curious. I have a background in Girl Scouts, so I'm just really curious what it will look like. But anyways, so that's another section, is electricity and internet. And then he also focuses on homes and schools and buildings to improve their infrastructure. He wants to increase affordable housing and spend money on school construction and on community colleges and VA hospitals, childcare facilities, and federal buildings. And then he also wants to spend money on workforce and innovation, focusing on improving community-based care for elderly people or people with disabilities so that people are more able to stay in home as much as possible, and to spend $180 billion on research and development, which any funding on research and development is a big bonus, particularly having to do with the National Science Foundation, and $35 billion to achieve technological breakthroughs to address the climate crisis. He also wants to spend $300 billion on manufacturing and business, including $50 billion for semiconductor research and manufacturing, and $30 billion on pandemic preparedness for future pandemics, and $32 billion on domestic manufacturing. And then finally, he also wants to spend $100 billion on workforce development programs targeted towards underserved groups, and that includes $5 billion for violence prevention programs. So there's a lot there, and some argue that this bill is just too many things, and that it deviates from infrastructure. I would like to point out that in addition to physical infrastructure, there's also societal infrastructure, such as taking care of the elderly and people with disabilities, and taking care of children to allow people to be able to go back to work. So I think I understand where he's coming from with that, but we're going to talk about it more with Mikey. So I will say that we didn't talk very much about the water systems in particular, because Mikey specializes more in energy, or he has more of an interest in energy topics, so we focused more on energy and transportation elements of the bill in general, but I just want to emphasize the value of improving our water systems and how important that is, and I will do a video on water systems and maybe interview someone regarding that topic so that it gets covered a little more. But yes, without further ado, let's go ahead and get right on to the conversation I had with Mikey. What were some of the main aspects of the infrastructure plan that really struck, or I guess jobs plan I should be really calling it? What part of that especially stuck out to you?
Ultimately, after skimming through it or trying to do more than skimming through that proposal, it is very chock full of proposals, good intentions.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of, I guess people would consider good ideas, things that need to be done, but there's no details. And as we always know with these types of, infrastructure bills, the devil is always in the details. It comes down to how these things are going to be implemented. And that's something we really can't talk about. But it's very, I guess in some ways, it's very bloated for being just being termed an infrastructure bill, but it's got some good stuff in it. I think things like the infrastructure stuff is good. The lead pipes, any of the water related stuff, especially the nature-based infrastructure, I think is a good sticking point.
Mm-hmm.
The wetlands and other things coming along those lines. All the energy stuff, all the tax credits and wanting to modernize the grid, all essential things. I think some of the other things that are non-environment are things like the remediation of properties. I think that's something that I think a lot of people missed. And then the zoning laws.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't expect that to be in there, which again is a very important thing when you deal with urban planning and affordable housing and all the other thing that they're going to have to take into account when they do such large infrastructure.
That's a good point. Yeah, we want to make sure that when things are being modernized, that it's not just gentrifying whole areas, right?
That's what zoning laws currently do.
Yeah. Besides the gentrifying point, like it would potentially like create a lot more energy efficient buildings out there, so that would definitely decrease our energy needs a bit, hopefully. But I don't know, things might even out. Like with like all the concrete that's going to take to like redo all the roads and stuff. I'm thinking
Mm.
like, geez, concrete's such a huge carbon emitter, but like it's so necessary at the same time. It's like us environmentalists, we recognize that there's a necessary evil that you have to go through in order to get to more of the long-term change. And that also has to do with finances, which a bunch of people don't really can think that is necessary to spend that much money on something.
Yeah, I mean that's a lot of the pushback for this bill is the price in itself because it is a very, and I don't know if Biden did this on purpose or he's just taking that approach of like this all-inclusive approach where this is a very could be viewed as a very bloated bill, a bill that really adds on more regulation depending on how some of these things are implemented.
Give me an example. What are some ones that could increase regulation?
I mean, things like anything that requires a price on something, an increase on this, especially the payment plan. I mean, that's going to be the main stuff. But anything that requires some new jurisdiction or some new control is going to add regulations. How you can do infrastructure, for all the nature-based stuff. I feel like that could be pretty streamlined. But again, it's hard to pinpoint something because there's no details. It's
Mm.
this is what we want to do. This is how much money we want to spend. This is the issue.
Yeah, no, it is a very
Yeah,
vague.
I think asking for an example currently is like, well, can't
Yeah, no, I
pinpoint
get you. I
even if
get
I'd
you.
like to.
Right, right. Well, it's interesting because, like, so I'm trying to remember with the previous plan that recently passed. I feel like I remember reading it and it was relatively vague too, right? So now comes the part where the details get brought in with all the congressional like conversation about it, right? That's the next step.
Yeah, because this is from what I assume it's just a proposal, so they've got to draft legislation
Mm-hmm.
to enact any of this stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And
So
how
they're
it's
gonna.
going to work because the things like everything from the social stuff is one set of bills, I would think, or a part of a larger bill, and then the grid stuff I would assume would have to be something that works along with FERC.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so that would have to be either a administrative regulation,
Hmm.
and so that's what I think going to go forward. We're going to see
Yeah, and it'll also be
a lot of
interesting to
that stuff.
see. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see also how it's divvied up between states and like certain projects within states and how much states are going to get to choose what the money goes
Well,
towards versus not.
from what I at least have read, most the states control most of the infrastructure they do.
Yeah.
So this bill would have to basically give money to states, and would the states be on the hook, or would they be just given money like do these types of infrastructure projects, and
Right.
then you know, so that'll be something to look for too. Because
True.
if the language is too vague in that context, states could do whatever they wanted,
Yeah.
with the infrastructure.
Yeah, right, right. I know it here in California, they've been working on doing like a bullet train from Sacramento all the way down to LA. And
That hasn't worked out, has it?
no, it hasn't. They don't have the funding for it. So they're wondering how much of the infrastructure bill for the California part of it will be able to go into that project because our public transportation sucks in our state. So, I mean, we have some public transportation that's pretty good in San Francisco, like the BART, but it's pretty bad. Like majority there's nothing. There's already that kind of stuff out there in other countries, but there isn't really one in the US.
Yeah,
Infrastructure hasn't been prioritized in funding since the 50s.
well,
So,
we're also a car-centric nation outside the cities. You
oh
know,
boy, there was a recent video by Climate Town, and he was just talking about the car centricness of our infrastructure and of our um design, the way that we design our cities and stuff, and it was great, but it's just like ridiculous how I knew that car companies had already Like there were examples of car companies killing the electric car for gas and things like that. But I didn't know also that they bought up all the public transportation and then just like destroyed it. I mean, I'm excited for Biden's love of trains.
Yeah, I don't know anything about the ridership of current trains or,
It's pretty
you
low
know,
right now, but I think, we need to create systems that work well for communities, and like kind of how Europe has done in many cases. They've done a pretty good job with their public transportation. And I think that there's just a big gap between the US and other countries. The other countries have really excelled on this. So there's a lot of pages already that we can take out from other places in order to actually do it right. There's a lot of research into doing it well. And we just need to spend the money to do that, because there needs to be less cars on the road, straight up. Like there needs to be less personal vehicles.
I think for Europe, because their cities are designed a certain way, you can't drive a tons of cars in their cities. And because
True.
how relatively close they are together, public transport and trains make sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in our cities, they are large. If we wanted public transport to work on a regular basis, we'd have to get something, that comes every what, half an hour or something, I would think, for people to continue to go places.
Yeah. Well, think of like
I
New
don't
York
know what.
City.
Yeah, I mean, outside the subway system, get
Well,
public
so that
transport to work that way.
brings to the point of getting rid of suburbs, really, because suburbs have resulted in our dependency of personal vehicles. There's a whole bunch of things that are problematic about
Yeah,
suburbs.
I don't think we're going to get rid of suburbs,
I
though,
don't think we're going
because
to get
many
rid of them,
people
but I think we need to drastically decrease them, because they like
replace them with what, though? If you want to get rid of suburbs, what do you do with the people who, you move out of the suburbs?
they go into the cities, but the cities need to be
Well,
built.
but they're out in the suburbs for a reason, though. They don't want to be in this city.
Yeah,
They
because right
like
now the
they like
city
this
is
separation.
That's because right now cities are unappealing, frankly. Cities are concrete. My mom would never want to live in a city because it is just a concrete slab, which right now it's a lifestyle choice to have just like a city preference versus suburbs, right? But if you with greener infrastructure and really blurring the lines between inside and outside and nature versus just like this, designing buildings so that they actually support natural light, they actually maintain heating and cooling and are more energy efficient, then people are going to be more interested in living in the cities, because then they're not going to have to commute as much. It's not going to be it's going to be like less lonely, and it's not going to be as advantageous for them to live in the suburbs as it is right now, because right now you have kind of the suburbs connected to the American dream, the whole idea that escaping the city is the goal. And I think that whole idea needs to kind of change, and that only can happen with better infrastructure. And
I think
that is part of Biden's plan as well, is to not exactly that, but it's to improve things such as homes, uh, and commercial buildings and schools and federal buildings. So through doing that, part of the way of doing it is energy efficiency, and that comes with sustainable design.
I think some people may move back if that happens, but I would still live on the outskirts. The edge of the city is where I'd live if that became the norm of greener cities. I'd still live on the edge of town.
No, maybe.
But that comes down to personal preference. It would have to be at least I would feel like it would be more than 5, maybe 10 years before when that transition happens, where you get a massive amount of people moving from the suburbs back to the city.
Oh, absolutely. But with public transportation and it just being more convenient and cheaper and more appealing for people, it's
Affordable.
yeah, it'll be affordable.
Affordability.
then more people
Those
will be willing to live in the cities because that's where the majority of the public transportation will have to be.
and that's why I like the mention of the zoning laws,
Yeah.
because whenever towns and states are like, oh, we have no housing, it's unaffordable. It's like because your zoning laws restrict building in your cities and
Yeah.
on certain properties.
Yeah.
So you have high rent, and then nobody wants to live there.
Right.
And that's
Right.
why everybody moves out. Yep, and commutes. Yeah, the details for that one because all I could do is really recommend things from the federal level.
Yeah.
He can't control cities or towns in
Yeah.
terms of local zoning laws.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that might have to be like there might be some incentive, like, hey, allow this property to be turned into this, because you don't want businesses all the time near residential,
Right.
because then you get things like environmental justice issues. Because certain zoning laws weren't respected, you got things like factories next to neighborhoods. So
Right.
there is, so that the zoning laws he's talking about are the exclusionary ones for housing, I'm guessing,
Mm-hmm.
and for certain properties.
Yeah.
Hopefully that gets expanded so we can actually look at it.
We really have to rethink how we create our cities and towns and stuff, and really center it in a way that supports public transportation. And I think that is a money suck that a lot of people don't want to look at. And that's how infrastructure can be so damn expensive, is not only is it really just fixing roads and making trains better, but it's also rethinking our urban planning systems, if we're going to actually do it correctly, because we've put bandages over these problems forever, and we're just going to put another big bandage on it unless we actually do it right.
Well, I mean, unless you're starting a new city, it's kind of hard to restructure, everything to work for the new stuff.
Yeah, I
The way
know.
you want it to, in terms of where roads are already, where certain properties are, because you're not just going to rip everything up. So I think that's the Band-Aid is the easier way to go in the short term, and that's what they've been doing.
Right, right. But there has to be a point where we just say, you got to rip up those roads. We need to rethink this, and that's a hard
That'll
sell.
take that'll take community support is what you'd have to have there.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So there needs to be some program or some way where you can go to communities and explain to them how this could improve their way of living, and get people on board for it.
Coming from the city who controls most of that infrastructure, that would be the smart way to do it, to get a petition going and talk to the city council.
Yeah.
But I haven't heard anything recently of somebody ripping up an existing road
Yeah.
when it's the property is being used in that area.
Right, right. See, the problem is that once you rip up a road, like how are people going to get from point A to point B without that road?
Somebody's going to make a new road is what will happen.
So I'm thinking, for example, like Highway 101, right? That would probably be a location kind of thing for a public transportation mechanism. I mean, where else are they going to put it? I feel like the only way you're going to be able to fully replace public transportation is if you replace some of the freeways and highways with public transportation, or you at least take away part of it and then just have like one lane for a car instead of two. But it has to go somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I guess on the highway, wouldn't you'd add the extra lane and put the bus system or whatever is a tram on that lane. It's got its own lane.
Right. Well, you would either make a new lane, or assuming that there would be more people to use transportation / you want more people to use transportation, you make it less convenient for them to drive by taking out 2 lanes in the process. Let's say it's like a 2 lane going one way, 2 lane going the other way kind of thing, and then you just like that in the middle or something,
I think people, because we enjoy the personal cars quite a lot, they will either take that inconvenience in stride with a little bit of annoyance, or if you really take out a whole lane, that type of thing, they will find the roundabout way, even if it takes them 15 minutes longer. and they will start causing, the extra drive traffic through an area that would never had it before, like small towns or something.
That only happens if there is an alternative, though. Places like going along
Yeah,
the coast, there's nothing.
like I assume again, states and would have final say
Yeah,
if that highway is, built or extended.
yeah,
Because usually most highways you have a smaller road to the side. At least I've seen over out this way.
yeah. Right,
I don't
right.
know if it's the same out by you. Like there's always a side road that's roundabout that
Mm-hmm.
allows you to get on the highway.
True.
But
Yeah, it
I
depends.
think starting in the cities would be your smart move for public transport. If you
Yes
can
and
show
no.
that it works
It's
and
like,
there's ridership,
I
and
mean,
it's efficient and effective, then more people ride it, everywhere else.
right, right. But I mean, I don't know. It just I'm not a city planner, so I'm having trouble visualizing it.
So
I think
it's,
that's just
it's,
the bottom
it's somebody
line.
else's job. Yeah.
It's someone else's job. Okay, anyways, yeah, do you think it'll pass?
What'll pass?
I mean, the infrastructure bill.
As is? No.
What do you okay, so here's the thing though, is that there were things that were changed in the last bill just for all Republicans to deny it again. So what is the incentive to even like listen to Republicans if they're all just going to say no in the end anyway?
Well, I think some Democrats have reservations too.
I haven't heard any main Democrat opposition to the
I
bill
think,
besides Joe Manchin. Joe
yeah, I
Manchin.
think he said there were 6 other Democrats with him that wanted to change certain parts of the bill.
Oh,
So
really?
that's 7. Yeah, that's 7 Democrats. I think I'd have to look back at the article. Somebody might, correct me. And then there's a handful of Republicans.
Hmm.
So I think there will be changes. Now, will the bulk of it get passed? That'll depend on what becomes regular administration work and what becomes regulatory.
Yeah.
Because much of this stuff is you could just send a administrative regulatory rule down the line to an agency, and they would have to, that recommendation. How much of this is going to be congressional? I assume at least half of it, but
Yeah.
it would be for a policy person to.
It's definitely going to take a while. It's going to take longer than the COVID package to
Yeah, and
figure out.
yeah, there was a lot of back and forth, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
there were a lot of things even in this bill that they're gonna have to figure out.
Yeah.
There are. Um, I think the budget is one of the bigger issues, isn't being paid for,
Hmm.
and there are some other things that for all the good stuff that's in this bill, like I think I was reading one thing like they want to build out the renewables, right? And that's good,
Hmm.
but there's a lot of things that come with that. You have a lot of land use, so all that has to be cited, all has to be expanded. That's to go somewhere,
Depends on how much
and
of it is state land versus federal.
that's true. But then you have Biden's 30 by 30. How are
True.
they going to balance that? And that's the other thing. And then there's this theme that I don't. It's here and there. The we got to beat China thing. Buy American, beat China, build out renewables. Well, I don't know. He probably knows this. You got policy around him.
Hmm.
But to build out renewables and a lot of the other energy sources, we need rare earths and rare metals.
Hmm.
Well, we only have one rare earth mine here in the U.S., and we export all that rare earth to be refined back to China.
Hmm.
China basically has 80% of the rare earths. So if we're going to build out everything, we've got to buy from China.
Yeah.
It's an inevitable fact. So that I guess that theme of we're going to just buy American for everything is really silly to me. I think we have global trade for a reason.
It's a good
You
point.
can't make everything here in the U.S. and expect it to be cheap. It's just not going to happen.
True. True. No, that's a good point. I think, I mean, yeah, as you were saying, it depends on what you're talking about. Certain things they have gone off source to other countries that could be brought back, like maybe more in the way of garment industry. There's other industries where they don't require rare earth minerals, and I think that it could be back and made in America sort of dealio. But
But they need an incentive, and there's no incentive to come back if you're going to raise corporate taxes.
trying the stick instead of the carrot, because the carrot was originally tax cuts and that didn't work. So now we're trying
No, but
stick.
I mean, but at the same, if you're trying to attract businesses back, raising corporate taxes is not a very good carrot. In term, placed with everything else, even with the tax incentives or the tax credit. So
I thought it's just
there seems
raising
to be
tax credits if things are abroad.
tax increases tend to be rolled back sometimes, and within the time frame that they've given to pay this back, there could easily be some rollbacks of those taxes, so that the budget for this kind of goes out the door then. But again, if you're just talking about like getting a budget, it's not a very good budget, manner to say, yes, this is going to be done, yet it's going to take 15 years for us to get any of the money back.
I mean, I don't understand how people can expect to have any improvements ever if no one pays for it. Someone has to pay for it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's how you get improvements, but it's
Exactly.
how it's being paid for, I guess, is the real issue. You're gonna see a lot of back and forth on that.
Yeah.
That might be one of the things the Democrats have to figure out of, is there an alternative of how to pay for this?
I feel like every method is going to piss like people off. It's anything will. Like we're going to tax the tippity top of people who really won't even feel it. No, can't do that. That's too much. Okay, we're going to tax corporations who have brought their manufacturing and stuff overseas. No, we can't do that. Okay. Like they're going to just shoot down whatever tax method people
Yeah, I mean, some people would argue we don't have, a revenue problem at all. It's a matter of spending, and really, you could just take the money that's in the defense budget, which just got expanded by Biden, a proposal.
Really?
And yeah, I think his defense guy, who is a former Raytheon man, they just got an expanded budget. Why not just take some of the defense budget and move it over to this infrastructure bill? Stuff like that, I think, is a smarter solution.
Yeah, moving money around.
I can't quote on numbers or anything, but it's a harder choice, because who in the federal government wants to give up their big budgets? Nobody. So it's more like political will. What's more viable?
One of the arguments that I saw is basically how this bill is basically a death sentence for natural gas, and how Biden was being hypocritical because he promised he wouldn't get rid of natural gas.
Eliminating some of the fossil fuels subsidies may increase prices of natural gas, but eliminating subsidies, I think it's a little more complicated than saying it's just this regulation and this one.
Right.
It talks about, I think the next couple sentences, like, we want an equal playing field. And I'm like, well, you might as well eliminate all subsidies at that point for all energy sources. But that's complicated to do. And it's in the current structure, that is not something that's viable to do.
Well, okay. In the way of equal playing field, I mean, that's similar to me in the realm of doing some of the racial justice stuff and saying, okay, now it's on equal playing field, because for a long time, like, there were inequities, and so it's like evening out the score kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of this bill is very much, it's just phrasing and good intentions, for that type of stuff. It's like, hey, we want to do this, and we're going to phrase it this way. we don't know how we're going to implement this yet, and we don't know how this is going to go through the correct channels, but we want to do this stuff.
Me just being my little optimistic self, I'm excited about the bill and what the possibilities are for it, because we really need it. We really need to improve our infrastructure, and I really hope that people get creative with it.
I agree. There are some good things
Yeah.
in the bill, but there are some real detractors that I think are going to either get in the news cycle or are going to be talked about. Like we could, streamline it a little bit more, um, mention, actual current resources. Like there's no mention of the current nuclear fleet, and we'll have to see if there's any challenges in terms of attorney generals from the states, industry, or
Yeah.
just local, just the courts.
Yeah.
Those would be the 3 or 4 big things to watch as this kind of progresses.
Oh, yeah. So people were comparing it to the Green New Deal, right?
I think it's slightly more realistic than the Green New Deal.
It's
It has a
different. The
lot
Green New Deal
more
wasn't.
numbers
Yeah,
compared to just grand schemes of things.
right. But that's what the Green New Deal was, is it was really just meant to move the needle,
And
towards,
yeah,
and it
it's
worked.
not that good of a comparison. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's apples and oranges. And I mean, though it worked, I mean, this is definitely a progressive agenda.
Yeah,
So
it absolutely is. And it's at least the way it's set up and with some of the drawbacks, or could be viewed as drawbacks. It's a small chunk of the Green New Deal ideas.
mhm. Yeah.
So I think that's what they're trying to push this time around. Get the small things and see what they can push forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it is interesting that they changed it from calling it the infrastructure bill to jobs plan.
Yeah. Well, it's the loose definition, and I think they did that on purpose for PR reasons.
Oh, they definitely did, but yeah, looking now at the plan, it makes sense because, for example, having uh more money for healthcare workers, like, or for caregivers. That's something that doesn't have to do with infrastructure, at least not physical infrastructure. Infrastructure of our society, that's another argument. So maybe that's
But
where
does the
they.
federal government have jurisdiction there? And that's just discussions people have.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was trying to cover a lot of it, and that's the gamble he's making in this bill.
Hmm.
Is you include a lot of stuff, get a lot of support,
Hmm.
but if it's too much, you're going to get a lot of even detractors from his own side at this point. Most of the time, bipartisan thing is what you want because that's what sticks around after your administration.
Right.
So, if the pendulum swings back, which it will inevitably, how much of this do you want repealed or removed? And that'll come down to how much bipartisan support they can have for it. I guess this is one of those conclusion type questions. How much do you think this infrastructure bill will affect the overall energy transition going forward?
I think it depends on how it's implemented. It that's where people need to be smart on how they spend the money, and people need to really think about more long-term changes rather than band-aid changes. So that's where um yeah, that's where I don't know. I hope that's where my hope comes in. I hope that it will make a difference. I think already seeing a increase in, electric vehicles and moving definitely in that direction quite quickly, and moving in renewables very quickly, that there's a decent chance that this could be a little kindle that we needed to really get this thing going, like a little bit of momentum. So, but
Mhm.
I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I don't know how much impact it's going to have, but you always talk about transitions, and there's a right way and a wrong way to do it.
Right.
Moving forward in a modern society. And
Mhm.
there was a recent report that came from Germany, and their transition. and their federal audit office recently said that in their to drive the energy transition, the federal government has accepted high electricity prices and supply gaps to drive that energy transition forward. And basically, the federal audit office said costs are out of control, and there's a threat of an electricity shortage. So, with all the transition stuff that's somewhat included in this bill, I think that's something we've really got to watch to avoid.
Yeah. No, I think the main reason why I'm optimistic is that I think the people advising this administration are pretty well versed in their topics, and Biden's got a lot of decent people on his arm. Thank you so much for talking with me about this, Mickey. And it will be interesting to see future discussions that we're going to have. So we are going to be doing the next book club book together.
We are.
Yes. Are you excited about it? You have the book now, right?
Yeah, I do have the book somewhere. Yeah, but I do got it.
I have to find it. I believe you. So we'll be able to dive further into these kind of topics and our different nuanced opinions on each of the topics in a more regular time schedule. So that's nice.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Good seeing you. Well, I hope you found this interesting. Please let me know in the comments below what part of the plan you're most excited about and what you think about some of the different arguments and viewpoints presented in our discussion, because there's definitely some discrepancy between Mikey and I on different points and how optimistic to be about this plan in general. So let me know what you think, and let us know what you think in the comments below. And next week we are going to talk about climate education. So stay tuned for that. Don't forget, on Thursday, we are going to finish All We Can Save. I'm very excited about that. So please join me for that. It has a lot of solution-based information on this last section. So if that appeals to you, definitely join us. And without further ado, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Remember to talk about the climate every single day and to support your local news organizations. And I'll see you later. Bye.